Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking this valuable time out of your busy schedules to join us for a presentation on the current state of the economy during COVID-19. We know how important it is to stay informed during this time, but also recognize that there are many news media and it could be overwhelming to sift through all the information. Our experienced adjunct faculty and academic partners, Junie Fairchild and Kiara Yates, will present the current state of the economy from micro and macroeconomic point of view and of course address the supply and demand. We hope this presentation will address some of the questions you might have in more clear and succinct manner. And without further ado, here is Junie Fairchild.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me. A little bit about me. My name is Junie Fairchild, and I am an adjunct instructor in the Quantitative Studies Department here at Southern New Hampshire University and an academic business partner. No doubt, the last few weeks have been challenging for all of us. Who would have ever thought our new norm would consist of state-mandated stay-at-home orders, the donning of face masks for a quick trip to the grocery store, or a relentless journey in search of toilet paper? Yes, when a good day is scoring a six-pack of toilet paper and considered a win. While the health complications and related deaths due to COVID-19 continue to devastate our country, I wanted to provide you with a glimpse into the perceived supply chain shortages that appear to be affecting each state equally. On March 11th of this year, the World Health Organization officially classifies COVID-19 as a pandemic. This caused millions of Americans to flock to brick-and-mortar stores and visit online retail giants such as Amazon to stock up on what they consider necessities. These must-haves included items such as toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and cleaning supplies, just to highlight a few. On March 19th, Gavin Newsom became the first governor to set mandatory stay-at-home orders in efforts to stop the spread. We all know what happened next. Many states followed the governor of California's direction, and stay-at-home orders swiftly rippled throughout the nation. Supply chain shortages emerged quickly, and the memes surrounding the lack of toilet paper quickly flooded social media. In this webinar, we will be covering a few different topics. Supply versus demand. Clearly, the demand is greater than the supply, right? What does logistics have to do with the shortages? We will also briefly cover the advantages and disadvantages of lean manufacturing, specifically just-in-time, along with learning about the bullwhip effect and possible supply chain risk mitigation strategies. Unprecedented demand is really an understatement. We must truly grasp the effects of COVID-19. This virus is affecting countries across the globe, not just the United States, meaning we are all fighting to acquire the same highly sought-after products, from alcohol-based hand sanitizers to relatively complex N95 respirators. I really appreciate this quote from Morris Cohen, who is a professor of manufacturing and logistics at Wharton. We've never seen a disruption like this, where a large number of countries are telling their populations to stay home, to not work. Prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, many of us never really thought about the supply chain. Basically, we go to the store and buy what we need and want, not an issue. However, the demand for commodity products, yes, this also includes toilet paper, increased exponentially as the virus started to spread across the globe. For example, toilet paper sales rose 51% between February 24th and March 10th as buyers across the United States started getting uneasy about the growing number of viruses. This doesn't sound so bad, right? But sales rocketed a whopping 845% in the latter part of March as states announced lockdowns. As you can imagine, this shocked the supply chain. So what does this mean? Supply shock is an unexpected event, such as the COVID-19 pandemic we're discussing today, which changes the supply of a product or commodity, which constrains output or disrupts the supply chain. This often results in sudden changes in price. We have seen this shock across all product families, but most pronounced in medical supplies and equipment, such as ventilators, masks, gowns, and N95 respirators. There have been reports that the U.S. government is paying double and triple the prices compared to the same time last year. I want to briefly discuss seasonality of demand, which is basically an up and down respective movement in demand occurring periodically. For example, Every winter, the demand for snowblowers and skis increase, and retail sales in general increase during the holiday season. The same demand behavior is repeated each year at the same time. This demand seasonality affords manufacturers and supply chain partners the ability to forecast and properly allocate time, money, and resources to meet such demand. With the demand associated with COVID-19 related supplies, there is no seasonality, meaning no one saw this demand coming. The forecasting opportunity and the ability to plan for the demand spike was non-existent. This brings us to lean manufacturing strategy of just-in-time. It's really all in the name. With just-in-time, materials arrive when they are needed, only when they are needed. This sounds like an epic failure regarding our discussion today, right? There are indeed both advantages and disadvantages of just-in-time. I have listed a few here just to give you an idea. As far as the advantages are concerned, reduced inventory, improved quality, lower cost, reduced space requirements, and more product variety. Now, as far as the disadvantages, problematic when unexpected changes in demand or supply occur, no room for mistakes as minimal stock is kept for reworking faulty product, and production is highly reliant on suppliers, and if stock is not delivered on time, the entire production schedule can be delayed. Clearly, the first disadvantage listed on this slide is extremely relevant. As we have discussed, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused unprecedented demand, causing supply chain shock. Does this suggest the supply chain is actually broken? No, not necessarily. Just-in-time has proven to be extremely effective in reducing variability, increasing quality, and results in cost savings for both the firm and the customer. However, this extraordinary and quite honestly unique demand accentuated one of the few disadvantages of just-in-time, which is typically insignificant. The role of logistics in the supply chain is massive and includes functions such as transportation, storage, packaging, inventory, forecasting, and procurement, just to name a few. If you have been watching the news or possibly taking that weekly trip to the grocery store, you may have seen or heard of possible milk shortages, or even more interestingly, heard of farms being directed to dump milk because of oversupply. How does this make sense when there are limits in the grocery stores regarding how much you can buy? The big issue is not so much supply and demand as it is logistics. If the logistics folks can't get the milk in a jug out the door and trucks to transport the perishable product, this will trickle down to the farmers and they will be asked to dump milk. Basically, some small bottling processors don't have an avenue to move their milk. As the demand for transportation rises to move consumer goods across the nation, so do cost and availability. This brings us to the bullwhip effect. The bullwhip effect is an interesting phenomenon. It describes the increasing variability in orders that are received by entities upstream in a supply chain, which in turn affects the amount of inventory that those entities hold. So what does this mean? The bullwhip occurs as orders are relayed from retailers to distributors, to wholesalers, to manufacturers, with fluctuations increasing at each step. The bullwhip fluctuations in the supply chain increase the cost associated with inventory, transportation, shipping, and receiving, while decreasing customer service and profitability. So as far as toilet paper is concerned, there are no shortages of materials and no discrepancies on the production line. Many consumers are overbuying and possibly even hoarding. Toilet paper will return to the shelves and the perceived shortage will eventually cause understock to overstock, with it all eventually leveling. If you want to help stop the bullwhip effect, only buy what you need and do not hoard highly sought after consumer products. This will help keep costs relative and assist manufacturers, retailers, and supply chain partners in filling those empty shelves. You may find it interesting to know most major companies already have some degree of supply chain risk management processes in place. As emphasized throughout this presentation, the demand with COVID-19 is unprecedented and global in nature. Even with this said, there are ways that organizations could possibly mitigate their supply chain risks even further. It's important to note, regardless of how good a process is, there is always room for improvement. For example, organizations can use multiple suppliers, multiple transportation modes, and effective logistic contracts. Think of Amazon. They have their own delivery service, but also use FedEx, UPS, and the United States Postal Service. Purchasing contracts that address price fluctuations, alternate sourcing, cross-country diversification, amongst many others. In short, companies need to focus not only on reducing potential disruptions, but also on how to prepare for responses to inevitable events such as COVID-19. Empty shelves, not an indicator of a broken supply chain. In fact, the U.S. supply chains are proving resilient in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please feel free to reach out to me. Take care and stay well.
Oh, hello. My name is Chiara Yates. I'm adjunct faculty of economics and academic partner. I work with Susanna, and I've provided a brief overview of the macroeconomic issues that we are facing with COVID-19. Starting with unemployment. When we look at unemployment, economists are looking at the worst numbers we've had since the Great Depression. As of April 24th, we have 26.5 million jobs lost. So we had 26.5 million unemployment claims filed, 4.1 million only filed in the past week. We are down from the week before. The week before April 18th, there were 5 million unemployment claims filed, which this tells us that we have reached the peak, and now the unemployment claims should decline in the future weeks. At this point, we are calculating a 16.2% unemployment rate. And if we look back at previous economic recessions, so the Great Recession of 2008, 2010, the peak was 12.6% unemployment. So we are already in a very high range of unemployment. And the peak in 1933 was 24.9%. The forecast for 2020 unemployment is 20%. So we're getting very close to the numbers of the Great Depression. Another tidbit of information, after the Great Recession, from 2010 to 2020, we were able to generate and create 22 million jobs. So at this time, those jobs are lost. However, the job loss of this time, of this economic downturn, is temporary. Those jobs still exist when the economy will start opening up again. And some industries will recover faster than others, according to the president of the Federal Reserve of Philadelphia. He, like the construction industry, will likely be able to go back to work a little sooner because social distancing is more easily achievable as compared to other industries like the entertainment industries or the tourism industry, hospitality, where social distancing can be more challenging. And those industries might have to open up, might take more time to recover. Tidbit of information, let's look at what's happening with oil prices. If you have been following oil prices, or if you're just looking at the gas pump, you will notice that the price of gas has gone down. The West Texas Intermediate crude price for May, so May futures crude, closed at a whopping minus $37.63 on Monday, April 20th. Nobody's buying oil. And luckily, it was able to climb up. It averaged at minus $16 on Tuesday and then closed at a positive $9.06. It was able to increase 20% by today. So by Thursday night, 23 April closing price, and then 24 April price, it's up at $16.99. But this was a maneuver. It was the U.S. threatened Middle Eastern oil supplies, and you can go look that up on how it occurred, but that helped boost the price of US oil, of the WTI crude. So when you're looking at oil prices, if you want to focus on what happens in the US, WTI crude, and the June prices are down 36%. So June is not looking much better for oil prices. Moving on to other indicators, the growth indicators, the International Monetary Fund has calculated the global growth for 2020 to be at -3%. I've included a chart here on the right so you can look at the world output, but you can also look at individual countries. The emerging market and developing economies obviously have different projections than the advanced economies because they have higher growth rates. And so you can compare the numbers. Focusing on the US, the International Monetary Fund forecasts a negative growth of 6.1% for the US, compared to MarketWatch that forecasts a -4.2%. And for 2021, the US growth forecast by the International Monetary Fund is 4.5%. MarketWatch had a 5.8%. The GDP growth for the first quarter of 2020 is -3.3%. And the second quarter has not calculated yet because it ends April 29th, but it's they're forecasting a -25% fall in GDP growth for that year, for this year. Moving on to monetary policies, you might have heard about the Federal Reserve as being pretty busy. January 20th, the Federal Reserve reduced reserve requirements, and then it reduced them again in March. The Federal Reserve does not reduce reserve requirements frequently. It's quite a complicated move to adjust to the new reserve requirements. The other tool that is used a lot by the Federal Reserve is federal funds rate. And on March 3rd, the Federal Reserve reduced the federal funds rate by 0.5 point. So it went to 1%, 1.25% range. And then on 15 March, again, it reduced it another 0.5 point. So we went to the 0%, 0.25% range. And we have now reached the federal funds rate of December 2008 during the financial crisis. This is the lowest rate. We're at the zero lower bound. The federal funds rate cannot be used anymore as a monetary policy tool to control short-term interest rates. And now the Federal Reserve has exhausted its traditional monetary tools and will have to work with quantitative easing and forward guidance to reduce the long-term interest rates, which are necessary. They are needed to be to stimulate economic growth. So this is quite important. So if you hear about quantitative easing and forward guidance, they are additional monetary tools. They're non-traditional. They're not used a lot, but these are the tools that were used in the 2008-2010 recession. Once all the traditional monetary tools were exhausted. And these are the same tools that the Federal Reserve is bringing out again to fight this economic downturn. That is all, folks, for macroeconomics issues. I hope you're all staying home, being safe, and we'll get out of this soon.